Hi, I'm Nate, 36, and the moment my wife said she'd choose her ex over me, it felt like someone reached inside my chest and unplugged something vital. Not ripped it out. Not shattered it. Just disconnected it. Cleanly. Quietly. Like a switch flipped in a dark room, and suddenly I could see everything with absolute clarity. The therapist's office always smelled like lavender and old carpet glue, calming to some people, I guess, but not to me. That Tuesday evening, I walked in thinking we were still fighting for something worth saving. 7 years of marriage, 9 years together. I believed we were fixing a crack in the wall. I didn't yet realize the entire foundation had been rotting underneath me for months. She was tense when we sat down, but lately she was always tense, always somewhere else in her eyes. The therapist launched into this radical honesty exercise, basically emotional Russian roulette, and I played along because that's what you do when you're the husband who thinks marriage is a team project. I didn't expect her to pull the trigger. When she said she'd been thinking about her ex, I felt a jolt, but not devastation. More like suspicion finally confirmed. She'd been distant. Distracted. Half present. But marriage makes you generous with excuses. Work stress. Hormones. Fatigue. Mercury in retrograde. Whatever. But when she admitted they'd been messaging? That one knocked the wind out of me. Not because she messaged him, but because she'd hidden it like it was some tiny irrelevant detail instead of a neon sign flashing over my head. This marriage is not what you think it is. Still, I held it together. I let her talk. I even let the therapist dig deeper, though every question felt like being peeled. And then came the nuclear moment. If you had to choose between your husband and your ex, right now, who would you choose? She didn't blink. Not a single second of hesitation. Her voice was calm, steady, almost relieved when she answered. Him. I swear the air in the room changed temperature. The therapist froze. My wife looked like she just confessed some romantic secret she'd been dying to get off her chest. Me? Something in me just let go. I stood up. Slow. Controlled. Like I was afraid any sudden movement might wake me up from a nightmare, except no dream had ever been this vivid. Then go choose him. Her face collapsed. Tears instantly welled. She reached for me like she could grab the words out of the air and shove them back into her mouth. But it was too late. Because it wasn't the answer that broke me. It was how easily it came to her. How natural it seemed. How genuine. 7 years of marriage. A decade of shared life. And my wife didn't even need a heartbeat to decide she'd rather be with a man who abandoned her years ago. Something inside me hardened right then. Not anger, not bitterness, just the quiet understanding that staying would turn me into a man I'd resent. I walked out with my jacket half-zipped, the therapist calling my name, my wife sobbing behind me. And when I got into my car, I didn't cry. Didn't scream. Didn't break down. I just sat there gripping the steering wheel, breathing like I'd been underwater for years and finally surfaced. By the time I reached my buddy's place across town, the numbness had settled in like armor. He let me in without a word, just handed me a drink and sat beside me. Hours later, when my phone buzzed with her voicemail, her voice cracking as she begged me to come home, I listened once. Once was enough. Because the moment she chose him, she also chose the end of us. And I wasn't going back. I didn't set out to go radio silent, it just happened. When the world you thought you lived in collapses in one sentence, the simplest instinct takes over: stop the bleeding. So I kept my phone off that first night, slept on my buddy's lumpy couch like it was a luxury resort, and let the numbness protect me from feeling anything too deeply. The next morning was when the shock finally shifted into something sharper. I woke up to sunlight stabbing me in the face, my back killing me, and the realization that my marriage had died in an office that smelled like lavender and panic. My buddy had already made coffee, terrible coffee, the kind that tastes like punishment, but it grounded me. He didn't push for details. Didn't offer advice. Just existed in the room with me, which was more helpful than any therapist so far. By noon, I'd replayed her words 100 times, not because I wanted to, but because my brain insisted. If I had to choose between you and him right now, I'd choose him. It was the lack of hesitation that did the damage. She didn't even buy herself time with a breath, a tear, a stutter. She said it like it was a truth she'd been waiting to release. That's what made walking out so easy. When I finally turned my phone on around 3 p.m., messages flooded in, her text coming in clusters, like she was typing faster than her thumbs could handle. I need to explain. Please come home. The therapist pushed me. I didn't mean it like it sounded. You're taking it out of context. Please, Nate, please. Then the voicemail, her voice shaky, desperate, doing that soft, breathy cry she always used whenever she wanted to undo something she'd done. I deleted nothing. I didn't respond either. I wasn't ready to feel anything more than the quiet. 2 days later, when the quiet finally settled instead of spinning, I scheduled the divorce consult. Not out of spite. Not out of anger. Because once someone tells you where you fall in their heart, that's the end of the negotiation. Walking out of that therapist's office wasn't impulsive, it was the first honest action in our marriage in a long time. But the fallout? That came fast. The night before my attorney meeting, she tried calling from 4 different numbers. When that didn't work, she sent an email. Long, dramatic. Apologizing so hard it almost circled back into manipulation. She kept saying it was the exercise, the heat of the moment, an emotional flashback to her past. All fancy ways of avoiding the real truth. She'd already moved on emotionally. She just hadn't done the paperwork. I slept on the couch again, fully clothed, because I didn't trust myself alone with my thoughts long enough to undress. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face in that office, relieved. Like choosing him unburdened her. Funny how the thing that hurt most wasn't that she wanted him. It was that she never fought for me. Not even a little. Not even in her imagination. By the time my attorney slid the stack of paperwork across his desk the next morning, the pen felt natural in my hand. My signature came out smooth, steady, clean. And that's when it hit me, not grief, not rage. Just the quiet, final understanding that the woman I loved had been gone long before she admitted it. Now I was just catching up to the truth. The midpoint, the moment everything turned from emotional rubble into full-blown warfare, came the day my attorney sent her the divorce papers. I expected tears, begging, maybe a final attempt at reconciliation. What I didn't expect was her entire family mobilizing like I'd just filed to annex part of their homeland. First shot fired, her mother. When my phone lit up with her name, I made the mistake of answering. I don't know why, some leftover reflex from years of trying to be the good son-in-law maybe. Before I could say hello, she launched into me like she'd been training for the Olympics of parental outrage. How dare you serve my daughter with divorce papers like she's a criminal? I opened my mouth to respond, but she bulldozed on. She told you something vulnerable in therapy, and this is how you react? Do you have any idea what you're throwing away? Ma'am, I said, keeping my voice calm. Your daughter told me she'd choose another man over me. Very clearly. Very confidently. That was a hypothetical. So is the future, apparently. I don't think she appreciated the sarcasm. You're going to regret this for the rest of your life. She snapped. If she's truly the best thing that'll ever happen to me, I said, then I'm excited to see what's next. Click. Block. Second shot, her best friend showing up at my buddy's apartment like some kind of divorce missionary. She didn't knock, she buzzed repeatedly until my friend threatened to unbolt the panel and rip the wiring out. She stood in the hallway, arms crossed, voice dripping with righteous indignation. You need to stop acting dramatic. She's a mess. Go home and talk like an adult. I leaned in the doorway, exhausted but calm. She didn't accidentally choose her ex. She didn't hesitate. That's not confusion. That's preference. She panicked. People don't panic into their truth. I said. You're being childish. No. I corrected. I'm being clear. You all just don't like the clarity. She left in a huff, muttering something about how I'd ruined my life out of pride. Funny how people always call it pride when a man refuses to be a doormat. Third shot, information. It trickled in through mutual friends, people who still talked to both of us, people who didn't have loyalty strong enough to stay neutral. The story unfolded backward, like watching a movie in reverse until you finally see who planted the initial bomb. Turned out her ex had reached out first. 6 months ago. 6 months of, innocent, catching up. 6 months of emotional hand-holding from a man who once dumped her like she was a heavy gym bag. 6 months of her keeping another emotional relationship warm while I sat across from her in therapy paying $140 per hour to fix a marriage she'd already mentally stepped out of. Therapy wasn't her attempt to salvage us. It was her attempt to transition. To soften the landing. To keep me stable while she tested the water with another man. By the time that realization settled in, I wasn't hurt anymore. I was done. What none of them knew, and what hit me with the force of a train, was the twist none of them saw coming. Her ex? The man she claimed she'd choose over me? He wasn't choosing her at all. But that revelation, that comes later. Because the real turning point wasn't learning about him. It was realizing I hadn't lost my wife. I'd already lost her months before. The only difference now was she finally admitted it out loud. The first real crack in her fantasy showed up about a week into the separation, and it didn't come from her. It came from a mutual friend who couldn't resist the gravitational pull of drama. He sent me a screenshot. Her ex, Mr. Perfect Alternative Future, had been posting Instagram stories with a woman. Not just a casual date. Not just some blurry bar photo with 2 drinks and a shadowy silhouette. No, this was full relationship highlight reel material. Beach photos. Matching sweaters. Dinner with what looked like her parents. A soft focus selfie on a hiking trail where the caption read, "Lucky to have her." For months they'd been together. 4. Which meant at the exact same time my wife was messaging him late at night, pouring her emotional guts out and testing the waters like a teenager, he was already building something solid with someone else. I stared at those screenshots for a long time. Not out of satisfaction. Not out of bitterness. Just disbelief at how blind she'd been. How deeply she'd convinced herself that the option she'd chosen in therapy was even available to her. It's one thing to lose your marriage to another man. It's another to lose it to a ghost of your own imagination. But that wasn't even the most surreal part. The real unraveling began when she realized I wasn't caving. The calls got more frantic. The emails more emotional. The apologies more desperate. At one point she wrote, "I didn't choose him. I chose the idea of him. I didn't mean to hurt you. But harm is still harm even if the knife wasn't intentional." Her family, meanwhile, escalated faster than the legal process could keep up. Her father showed up at my workplace, demanding security let him see me. HR had to intervene. They thought he was some disgruntled client. Her sister started texting from random numbers like she was running an underground harassment ring. You don't give up on your wife over a single mistake. Be a man. You're destroying this family. Funny, I thought, how nobody expected her to be a woman and honor her vows. Through all of that, I stayed quiet. Detached, but not cruel. My attorney told me to stop responding entirely, so I did. Silence became my shield, simple, effective, impossible to misinterpret. But silence does something to people who rely on emotional chaos. It makes them frantic. It makes them reveal their true intentions. She finally broke the no-contact rule through our attorneys after learning I'd seen the screenshots. She didn't deny they'd been talking. She didn't deny it had gone on for months. She just said, it wasn't romantic. It was emotional support. Right. Because nothing says emotional stability like secretly messaging the ex you'd pick over your husband. But the moment she realized her ex had a girlfriend, an actual partner he was serious about, that's when the tone shifted. Her messages weren't about love anymore. They were about regret. About fear. About the reality closing in on her that she had jumped off a cliff and the man she thought would catch her wasn't even looking. Funny thing? That didn't make me feel triumphant. Just tired. Tired of being someone's second choice. Tired of being the safe option. Tired of realizing I'd been trying to build a life with a woman who didn't see me as a partner, just a placeholder. The truth was becoming painfully clear. I wasn't losing her now. I'd lost her long ago. And I was only just beginning to understand how deep that loss went. The divorce machinery kicked into full gear, and suddenly my life became a spreadsheet: assets, liabilities, percentages, balances. It was surreal how something as enormous as the end of a marriage could be distilled into math. But the math wasn't even the frustrating part. It was the tactics. Her attorney came out swinging like this was a custody battle over a yacht. First, they demanded I vacate the marital home. Not because she needed it, but because the emotional strain of staying with her parents was detrimental to her well-being. Sure. The house belonged to both of us. She had just as much right to leave it as she did to stay in it. My attorney shut that down instantly, but it showed me exactly what kind of fight her family wanted: scorched earth, as long as she wasn't the one paying the legal bills. Then came the accusation that I'd hidden income, because I'd gotten a $15,000 raise that she signed off on during tax season. Her attorney tried spinning it like I'd strategically concealed future earning potential to manipulate marital assets. My attorney laughed, a full, unfiltered laugh, right in the middle of a Zoom meeting. It was the first moment of levity I'd had in weeks. But the emotional games? Those kept coming. Some nights, my phone would buzz with unknown numbers. Not scams, her sister, her mother, her best friend, rotating like they were taking shifts. You're abandoning her in a crisis. She's falling apart without you. She was vulnerable. You should have supported her. You can't throw away a marriage over one mistake. But it wasn't one mistake. It was the 6 months before it. And the 2 years before that, when she started pulling away without ever telling me why. And the therapy sessions where she sat across from me, knowing the truth but choosing silence because it was easier to maintain a fantasy than confront reality. Still, their version of the story was easier than the truth. In their version, I was the villain. I was the man who didn't forgive. The man who walked out. The man who gave up. In their version, she was the wounded one. But then something unexpected happened, something that shut down whatever hope she'd still been clinging to. A mutual friend told me her ex got engaged. Engaged. The man she said she'd choose over me didn't choose her then, didn't choose her after, and was very publicly choosing someone else now. And that, apparently, broke her. Her messages to me changed overnight. They went from apologies to existential despair, from "I miss you" to "I don't know who I am anymore." She tried calling again. I didn't answer. She tried emailing. I skimmed, never replied. The moment she chose him, I chose myself. But watching her crumble under a fantasy that never actually existed. That was the moment any remnants of anger drained out of me. She hadn't betrayed me for a man. She'd betrayed me for a story she'd written in her own mind. A version of her past she romanticized until she convinced herself she needed to return to it. And now that story had expelled her completely. I didn't feel satisfaction. Didn't feel vindication. I felt distance. Like I was watching someone else's life unravel from a faraway window, a life I used to be in, but no longer belonged to. The house went on the market. My buddy kept letting me stay with him. Days blurred into lawyer meetings, signatures, and the slow dismantling of a shared life. But inside me, something had shifted. Not numbness. Not grief. Just a clean, solid understanding. There was no version of this marriage that could ever have been saved. Because you can't save what someone else already abandoned in their heart. The day we finalized everything didn't feel like an ending at first. It felt administrative. Clinical. Like I was closing a bank account I no longer used. My attorney handed me a pen I'd touched so many times in the last 2 months it practically had my fingerprints engraved into it. But the weight of what I was signing didn't hit until I saw her across the courtroom. She looked smaller somehow. Shoulders sagging, eyes dulled, like she'd aged a few years in a few weeks. Grief changes people, but guilt ages them faster. Her mother sat behind her wearing an expression that could sharpen knives. Her father kept shifting in his seat like the entire court system personally offended him. My attorney leaned over and whispered, "Remember, this is the part where you say nothing." I nodded, though I already knew there was nothing left worth saying. We moved through each item. House sold. Assets split. Retirement accounts divided. Cars retained. No alimony. Clean break. Her attorney tried one last flourish, some exaggerated plea about how she'd sacrificed career opportunities to support me. My attorney swatted that down so quickly it practically left a burn mark on the table. By the time the judge stamped the final approval, her mother was glaring at me like I'd just committed a war crime. Then came the moment I wasn't ready for. We had to stand side by side to sign the final dissolution papers. For the first time in months, she wasn't crying, wasn't pleading, wasn't angry, she just looked defeated. She leaned slightly toward me and whispered, "I never meant for any of this to happen." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't snap. I didn't show even a trace of the hurt that had once set my whole world on fire. "I know you didn't," I murmured back. "That's what makes it worse." She blinked, confused. "You didn't mean to destroy anything. You were just living your truth. And your truth was that your future didn't include me." Her eyes filled instantly. Her mother swooped in like a hawk, whispering frantically, shooting daggers at me with every syllable. I didn't stick around. The moment the papers were signed, I handed the pen back to the clerk, buttoned my jacket, and walked out, no hesitation, no backward glance. Some endings don't require dramatics. Some endings just require honesty. 2 weeks later, I moved into my new place, a small one-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood with creaky floors and ugly yellow cabinets I've grown oddly fond of. It smells like nothing. No memories. No ghosts. No lavender and carpet glue. Just air and space and possibility. A few mutual friends disappeared from my life completely, which hurt more than I expected. Others stuck by me, choosing to actually listen instead of swallowing her family's version of events. My buddy, the one who let me crash on his couch for nearly 2 months, helped me move in. Refused to take gas money. Told me he'd never seen someone walk through hell so calmly. He wasn't wrong. It wasn't strength. It was exhaustion. There's a point where you're too tired to fall apart. And then, right when the dust settled, I got her final message. An email. Not defensive. Not manipulative. Not begging. Just truth. She apologized. Admitted she meant what she said in therapy. Admitted she'd been living in, what if, fantasies she never bothered to confront. Admitted I deserved someone who chose me without hesitation. I read every word. Let it sink in. Let the weight of it land softly, without rage. And then I closed it. Didn't respond. Because answering would have been reopening a door I'd already bricked shut from the inside. I don't hate her. I don't wish her misery. I don't even want revenge. I just want peace. I want days where my chest doesn't feel tight, where I don't replay that therapy moment on loop, where the echo of her voice saying she'd choose someone else stops bouncing around in my head. And slowly, day by day, that echo is fading. The truth? I didn't lose her in that office. I lost her long before. That day was just the moment I finally stopped pretending otherwise. Now, for the first time in years, I'm standing on solid ground again. And the future, whatever shape it takes, is finally mine to build. The strange thing about endings is that they leave a quiet behind them, an unfamiliar quiet you don't know what to do with at first. The first morning in my new apartment, I woke up before my alarm. No footsteps in the hallway. No tension in the air. No sense of navigating around another person's moods. Just stillness. For a moment, I didn't recognize it as peace. It took time for that to sink in. The first week alone felt like detox. I kept catching myself reaching for words, updates, questions, comments about my day, only to realize there was no one on the other side of the silence anymore. It was disorienting, but it wasn't painful. It was clarifying. Like my mind was cleaning out a cluttered room I didn't know was full. The thing that surprised me most wasn't the sadness. It was the relief. Not jubilant relief, not triumphant relief, just the kind that settles into your bones and whispers, "You're finally out." Because the truth is, the hardest part of the marriage wasn't the end. It was living in it during those final years, sensing something was breaking but having no proof, no explanation, no direction. It was trying to fix a puzzle without realizing half the pieces belonged to a different box. But now, every piece was mine again. My buddy kept checking in even after I'd settled, dropping by with takeout, plopping onto my couch like it was his, insisting we watch terrible action movies because I needed cinematic therapy. I didn't argue. The company helped. The normalcy helped even more. My routine slowly rebuilt itself. Work, gym, cooking actual meals instead of stress snacks, even picking up old hobbies I'd abandoned somewhere along the way. One afternoon, I caught myself laughing, genuinely laughing, at something my coworker said, and it stopped me cold. Not because laughing was strange, but because it felt unforced. Natural. Alive. And that's when I realized healing doesn't come in a dramatic wave. It shows up in these tiny, barely noticeable improvements. A morning where breathing feels easier. An evening where you don't replay memories. A conversation where you don't brace for disappointment. A moment where the future doesn't feel heavy. The biggest shift came unexpectedly. I walked into a grocery store on a Sunday morning, half asleep, grabbing eggs and coffee. Out of nowhere, I looked around and thought, I'm okay. Not great. Not ecstatic. Just okay. And after everything? Okay felt like a miracle. The therapist's office, the confession, the divorce, her family's attacks, the financial hit, the months of unraveling, none of that disappeared from memory. But they stopped defining me. They became chapters, not chains. A few nights later, sitting in my living room with the window cracked open, I realized something I hadn't been able to admit before. Leaving that therapy room wasn't the hardest moment of my life. It was the bravest. Because I didn't walk out on her. I walked out on the version of myself that accepted being second place in his own marriage. And once you stop being willing to shrink, to swallow, to settle, your entire world shifts. Your identity rebuilds itself. Your standards recalibrate. People keep asking if I'll date again. The answer is simple, not yet. Maybe not for a while. I'm not avoiding love. I just finally know what I deserve in it. Someone who chooses me with their whole chest. Someone whose first instinct in a crisis is to turn toward me, not away. Someone who doesn't hesitate when asked who they pick. Someone who sees me. Until that shows up, I'm content being alone. Comfortably alone. Peacefully alone. Quietly alone. The day I signed those divorce papers, I thought the story ended. But now I understand that was just the prologue ending. The real story, the one where I build a life that's mine, unshared, unburdened, and unshadowed, starts here. And when the day comes that I let someone else into this new life, they won't be competing with ghosts. They'll be meeting a man who knows exactly what he's worth. And he's not willing to be anyone's second choice ever again.